Welcome to this presentation on training to experience Nibbana. I will talk about the practice leading to awakening or Nibbana because knowing what is the right practice leading to awakening is the most important thing to know in order to gain realization. We can make a distinction here. For example, Dhamma can be practiced in many ways, and for those who practice Dhamma in the right way, it becomes possible to gain awakening. This is an important topic in that sense, as otherwise the number of years one has practiced Dhamma does not contribute much here. It is rather realization itself that benefits one to abandon stressfully and also to abandon samsara. When we talk about the practice, we can also make a distinction between the theory and the practice. So the one who knows what is written in various textbooks and similar sources can have a good theoretical knowledge. One who has practiced Dhamma to abandon fetters to gain cessation has practiced Dhamma in the right way. In the end, awakening is about reaching cessation. Essentially, having some theoretical knowledge is beneficial. Practicing to gain realization is even more beneficial. To train to gain realization, it is also beneficial to know what is Nibbana. Sometimes Nibbana is defined as emptiness. Emptiness is a concept. In other words, Nibbana can be defined as emptiness from one perspective, and this concept only explains Nibbana partially. Similarly, sometimes we can see Nibbana is explained as happiness and peace. These ways of explaining explains Nibbana only partially as well. Similarly, we hear that being aware of the present moment is Nibbana. Well, this is mindfulness. Nibbana means reaching from mindfulness to right vision to right mindfulness. So something that lies beyond mindfulness. So mindfulness is a good state. To gain realization, we need to go a few steps ahead. To understand Nibbana fully, it simply means Sri-Mentri and beyond. At least the training path available for most of us is such that Sri-Mentri and beyond. Apart from those individuals who are likely to become universal Buddhas, which is rare in practice, which in fact happens 1 in a million years, and a few handful number of individuals who can become private Buddhas during the time where there will be no teachings of Buddha on earth. For the great number of us, the path ending to suffering, meaning Sri-Mentri and beyond. All kind of Buddhist schools we have today have not come to exist independent to Buddha, and all these schools have developed by hearing the teachings of Buddha. So essentially, we have the same teacher and we are one. Theoretically, it is good to know that there are 4 stages of enlightenment. So when awakening happens to oneself, one becomes aware that these changes are really happening within. Similarly, theoretically, we can say that at each stage of enlightenment, the relevant fetters are abandoned. In practice, among those who have gained realization, you will notice that they have abandoned these fetters in practice. So for example, for those who have abandoned the identity of self-will, They will no longer grasp into precepts, rites and rituals, ceremonies and schools and divisions, and so on. So why are we talking about it? Because we want to know what is the right practice to gain realization. In other words, if we were to twist it around, the right practice leading to gain realization means abandoning these fetters in practice and training the mind to be free of these fetters. This is also interesting, as in Buddha's teachings, we focus on developing the mind. So the purpose of precepts, the way of life, meditation or chanting, everything else is simply for the purpose of training the mind. Given that realization is simply a matter of training the mind, developing inner qualities of a person is important. So if we were to link this aspect to the attachment to rites and ritual once again, an interesting point that emerged from it is that if we were to explore the social level, in general we can see that awakening is labeled to external factors such as dress code, appearance, and certain lifestyles and so on. However, what is important is looking into inner qualities of a person, and that is what true Dhamma is about. So in the literature, we can see, irrespective of lifestyle, irrespective of the dress code, people who were homeless, people who were listening to Dhamma in streets, gain realization to become noble saints. So it is the mind training that matters, as well as the inner qualities of a person. So one who gains realization will be able to see beyond symbolic values, to see what lies beneath these symbols, and to see the inner qualities of people. So if we were to question how to give up attachment, giving up attachment is also to be done mentally. This is also because that the world is created in one's mind. It is also a very practical thing to do. One needs to practice this kind of training in the mind day-to-day life. So for instance, seeing things is okay, hearing things is okay, using things is not what we are talking about. Rather, true Dhamma is not attaching to things. So that also means anyone who is practicing any kind of lifestyle or doing whatever the thing they wish to do, as long as their mind is not clinging into things, then they can gain realization. So that means people who are working as doctors or musicians or any kind of professionals, as well as non-professionals or anyone else who are practicing the teachings of Buddha to develop the mind, can reach the kind of awakening state to the truth. So while living with sensory experience, training the mind to see the truth is what Buddha has taught us. So from that sense, we are not cutting off necessarily the kind of things we are seeing or hearing. Maintaining 5 precepts is essentially helpful. And so we follow the middle path, not the extreme. This is also subject to an individual, of course, but following the kind of middle path, as well as while living with sensory experience, training the mind to see the truth becomes a very practical thing to do for most people. And also the kind of nibbana to be understood by daily life experience. If someone were to try and enjoy life, we'd eventually realize at some point, most likely, most kind of things that we tend to expect enjoyment turn up to give sufferings to us. And so if at all these kind of things leading to give us pain and suffering, then they tend to be meaningless in the end. And then at that point, someone is seeking something more beyond ordinary, and that is where Nibbana is. So it is a very practical thing to do. It is not about not using things, but not identifying things that needs to be practiced in daily life. It is also a progressive training path, so observing mind in daily life is essentially beneficial. When one experiences pain, disappointment, becoming aware of one's pain and disappointment is essentially helpful. And just if someone can somehow try to observe how thoughts appear and vanishes without one's control, and try and reflect how these thoughts function automatically, and that because they function automatically, they are not self. If it was self, the self should have control of it, but they function on their own. And so this kind of reflection regularly will help one to move from the conceptual understanding to gain realization. Besides train the mind to the middle in daily life, that means try and not to be disheartened when things go bad. At the same time, try and avoid slowly being extremely happy, full of things. To maintain a stable mind slowly is a helpful practice to gain realization. As you can see, gaining realization is something to do in practice. There are lots of things to catch up in practice. So as you practice your mind this way, one will realize when there is too much attachment, it produces a lot of mental suffering. When someone will reduce attachment, it will produce lesser pain. So it is also important at that stage to be aware that the pain has reduced when the attachment is reduced, but it is not made stable yet. The stability comes to exist or establish along the state of reaching stream entry. In general, people tend to get stuck into a system and they try to maintain the system. Following the system can lead to existence. The mind that is trained to get attached to a system can also bring a lot of sufferings. This is also because since childhood our mind is programmed to think in a certain way, and that restricts us to see something beyond the kind of expectations that the society put on us. So for instance, if there is a young adult who is about 18 or 20 years old, if the society expects one finds a job at that age, but if that person lives in a bad economic place where it is hard to find jobs, not finding a job itself will lead that person to feel depressed about or be really upset about it. So because our mind is programmed to think and expect in certain ways as the society has trained us, that drives people to tremendous stressful states. And so trying and understanding how this mind is restricted due to social learning and slowly trying to see beyond these expectations will help one to slowly reduce sufferings. Once again, talking about the practice of train the mind to the opposite thinkings, which means social learning, lead to exist. Opposite leads to cessation. So all this is a matter of training the mind, something that happens in an individual's mind. External factors do not count here. Regarding the practice, of course, it is helpful to take time to reflect on self daily. So the more you think and think again about self and the things around things, the understanding of teachings becomes a realization. And that also means trying to rid of some of the bad habits and slowly replace them with good habits. And testing one's own mind is useful, especially when you feel pain or suffering. Try and see how untrained mind get attached to things, and because of attachment, how much endless suffering that it produces. But it doesn't have to be that way. Because it's hard, because it's not easy, there should be a way out. And the way out is also to slowly try and reflect and train the mind in the right way to gain realization. Weak mind brings greed, hate, and delusion. Then understanding that it is one's own fault and taking responsibility for one's own action is really helpful here. In the end, one comes alone, lives alone, and one owns one's own karma, and one has the identity of feel because of it one comes to suffer, and it's difficult, and so taking responsibility to wanting to abandon sufferings can help one to gain realization. If you were to talk a bit about the practice of trying to be kind to self as well as to others, and taking time to understand self by reflecting more often, trying to kind of reduce expectations you have of yourself as well as others, training the mind to the middle, as well as training the mind to the opposite. Drop attachment to social practices, engaging in meritorious activities, maintaining at least 5 precepts, mindfulness, and observe how mind works, reflect on Buddha, Dhamma, and Noble Sangha to develop 4 factors of stream entry, and engage in 10 wholesome deeds are essentially helpful to gain realization. Wholesome activities include cultivating generosity, upholding morality, meditation, and mental cultivation, showing respect and reverence to those who deserve it, serving others, transferring merits, rejoicing in others' good deeds, listening to the Dhamma, expounding the Dhamma, establishing right view. They are helpful. So in conclusion, trying and not getting attached to social frames in mind, engaging in 10 wholesome deeds, reflecting on triple gem as much as possible to develop 4 factors stream entry, training the mind to the middle, and try and slowly abandon fetters to become a free person will be the greatest gift one could give to abandon stress for oneself as well as a blessing to others. So for example, people who become noble saints, irrespective of the kind of thing what they do, where they live, they will be a blessing to others. For example, if it's a doctor, it will be a nice doctor who look after self as well as others. If it's a musician, the musician will be a caring, a soft-hearted person who is looking after self well as well as looking after others. This way, anyone in the society can become noble saints and become blessing to everyone. At work, they will treat others well. At home, they will treat families well. At temples, they will treat colleagues well. So it is for all who wants to abandon stress and be a blessing to all. And these are the teachings of Buddha. And this is of course a brief summary and one way to explain about stream entry and how to awaken and how to practice in a way to gain realization. During the course that we will commence in October 2022, I hope we get more opportunity to talk more about it. With that note, I will end this presentation here. Thank you very much for listening.